Hey guys, what's up? Hope all's well out there, and thanks for tuning back in to this afternoon's video. And I'm just heading back from Table Rock Lake right now. I had a fish the moment on the water lesson down there, and heading back and got to go pick Elijah up, and just wanted to take a few minutes to do this afternoon's tip while I got a few minutes to do it. And what I want to do today has been another one I've been thinking about a lot, and it's pertinent. I'm sort of going to give you guys a teaser as far as on next week's virtual seminar that Johnny and I have on our Fish the Moment virtual seminar, post-spawn jig fishing seminar. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a teaser on what this seminar is sort of going to be like, and that is how long should you wait before you set the hook on a jig. And if you guys are interested in the seminar we're going to do next Thursday, you can go to fishthemoment.com and sign up for it, and that'd be much appreciated. I'd like to see you guys on board with that. But today I want to give you guys a little teaser on how to do that. So, jig fishing, man, it's something I've been doing forever. It's one of my top 3 favorite techniques that I like to fish. And you hear people talking about a lot about, oh, they like to fish a jig because it's a high percentage lure and you don't lose a lot of fish on it. But man, everybody I know, including myself, has lost just as many bass on a jig as they have any other thing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the way bass bite a jig, and sometimes a bass will clamp down so hard on a jig, especially a full-size jig, that when you set the hook, especially if the jig's got a big head on it, like a ½ ounce or bigger, you simply don't have enough hook setting power to open the fish's mouth to penetrate that hook, and they just open their mouth and the jig comes out. That's why you lose a lot of them. But one of the things that you can do on that is really understand how to set the hook and how long to wait before you set the hook. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, this completely depends on a lot of different variables. I'll give you guys one example, one extreme situation I was in as far as jig fishing and how I learned the hard way. I was fishing an FLW tournament down at the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana, and this place is it's one of my favorite places to fish. It's a vast bayou. It's got tons of stuff to flip, and I found this one canal, and I was flipping a full-size jig. I was using a 3/8 ounce full-size jig with a big zoom, big salty chunk on it, just a big jig. And it was the last day of practice, and I got into this canal, and I started working down this bank, and I started getting bites. But I'd set the hook, and there would just be nothing there. And I could tell these were not little fish. I mean, you could just tell the way they were picking the bait up that they were decent sized fish, because they'd pick it up and move with it, and you could feel them thump it and move out with it. And I could not connect with one. So I started letting them swim a little bit longer with it, and I started letting them swim a couple feet with it, set the hook, nothing. Then I started letting them swim, 5 or 6 feet with it, set the hook, still missing them. And I'm going through, I've had 6 or 7 bites by now. And finally, after missing like 8 or 9 fish, I finally just said, I'm going to let this fish swim forever with it. So I got a bite again, and I just basically pushed the thumb bar on my reel, and I let this fish swim like behind the boat, maybe 20 or 30 feet behind the boat, and I finally set the hook on it, and I caught it, and it was about a 3-pounder. And in that tournament, for whatever reason, it could have been a combination of the personality of the fish, the water temperature, the water clarity, the way the fish were setting up. I'm not really sure. But in that tournament, I wound up making the top 10 in that tournament, making the finals in it, and I had to let every one of those fish swim 20 foot with my jig before I set the hook on it, and none of them swallowed it. Every one of them was hooked perfect, but for whatever reason, it was like they were picking up the tail on the thing and carrying it off with the tail, and then after about 20 feet, they'd finally, suck it in. That was one extreme. But here's a general rule of thumb, what I'm talking about, as far as I'm going to give you guys sort of a foundation on what you want to do as far as setting the hook on something. The biggest consideration that you need to take into consideration is the type of cover that you're fishing, as far as how long you can wait. I can tell you right now, most of the time, if you have a good fish that hits a jig, like a 3-pound plus fish, or even a 2.5-pound plus fish, that fish is going to swim a long way before, or even if they ever drop it. And I've learned this from fishing jigs with no hooks on them. When a good fish hits a jig, you don't have to be in a big hurry to set the hook, because they're going to hold on to it. So the main consideration that you have to take into factor consideration is the type of cover that you're fishing. If you're, say for example, if you're flipping thick mesquite trees down at Sam Rayburn when the water's flooded and you get a bite, you can't push the button and let that fish swim everywhere, because they're going to wrap you up, big time. So in a situation like that, you don't have any choice, but you've got to set the hook almost immediately when you feel that bite. But what happens is, that's the only time that I set the hook immediately, is if I'm in a situation where I feel that if I do let that fish move with me, it's going to get me wrapped up and I'm going to lose that fish. That's the only time I set it quick. Every single other time, what I do, I'll pitch in there. I'm pitching a dock, I'm fishing a lay down, that's not real thick, stumps, bare banks, whatever like that. When I get a bite, I pick up on it and I let the fish move with it. And I try to see what direction that fish is moving with it. Then I reel down to that fish and I feel tension on the line. I don't ever want to set that hook on a slack set. So I reel down straight to the fish until I feel that fish on the jig. And then I just pull back hard on a tight line and reel fast at the same time. So most of the time what I'm doing is my rule of thumb for the most part is I like to let the bass swim, 3 to 4 feet on a jig before I set the hook, unless that jig is over an object in, heavy cover, that type of stuff. So I think a lot of people, the biggest mistake I see people make in jig fishing, actually 2 mistakes I see they make, is they set the hook too soon, and they set the hook before they take the slack out of the line. Don't ever set a jig hook set on a slack line, because a lot of times you're going to lose that fish. You do much better, pulling it on a tight line. But if I can give you guys an estimate here as far as how long to wait before you set the hook, is when you get a bite on cover that's not over horizontal, most of the time, count to 3 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then set the hook. If you're in a situation where you get a bite flipping a thick bush or something like that, you basically need, as soon as you detect that strike, you need to reel down, put some tension on that line, and set the hook. Don't let that fish move. That's a real big key on it with it. And sometimes, if you're missing those fish, like I was down at the Chapelai Basin, sometimes you have to let them swim further with it. This is particularly true if you're using a bigger size jig that's got a big trailer on it. If you're using a big trailer like a Rage Craw or a Zoom Super Chunk or a Big Salty Chunk, something like that, a lot of times, especially in the springtime of the year and even post-spawn, those fish will pick that jig up by the trailer and they'll carry it off the area, especially if those fish are in a bedding mood. And a lot of times when you set the hook, they just got that trailer in their mouth. I've seen them do that before. So that's just a general rule of thumb. As an overview here, guys, here's the advice I'll give you on how long to set it. Do not get into a big hurry. When you get a bite, don't become like a live nerve ending and feel like you got to jack that fish as soon as you feel it. Take your time, reel down, give that fish a chance to move with that bait, position that bait in that fish's mouth. Take that bait a little bit deeper before you set the hook, unless, like I said, you're in heavy cover. And even if I'm flipping mat grass, say if I'm in Florida punching a 1 ounce weight flipping a big heavy jig in deep hydrilla, I still let them swim with it in deep grass. I'll let them swim 4 or 5 feet with it before I set the hook, even in grass. Like I said, the only time I don't is a thick bush, buckbrush, mesquite trees, flooded cover, that type of stuff. So anyway, give it a try. I think it'll help you guys land a lot more fish. Don't get in a big hurry, settle down. You don't have to get in a big rush. good fish is not going to drop that bait. They're not going to, spit it out. They just don't do that very often. So just a couple tips there, guys. Hope you guys join us next Thursday at the virtual seminar. Again, you can sign up for it at fishthemoment.com. We got a ton of jig information. That's not even touching the iceberg what we're going to talk about here. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much appreciated. See you later.